Okay, thank you, Jason. That was great. Can I get the mic too? Cool. So we have some time now to answer questions from all of the presenters that we had here today, and we also can try out some equipment, some gear. I'd also, if people have questions about the Singularity chapter being involved, that can also be thrown out here as well. But the major piece here for today is that I want to make this practical and real when people come together so that they're getting out of it what they want to get out of it. So I purposely had conversations ahead of time with each one of the presenters just to find out a little bit more about them. I have I spend most of my time on the enterprise side, so that's my world. My world is not where many of you come from. So I want to make sure the outcomes, though, the reasons you've come here, get achieved. So if you have some questions of why you came or things that you want to get from the speakers, raise your hand. And if you don't, that's fine as well. Go ahead. Yes, that would be great.
A lot of the value for things like phones like this comes from the software, the apps, right? Without the apps, these things are worthless. In the enterprise space, software development is a high-cost, high-risk endeavor, and that's for simple things like CRUD apps. It seems like the development tools needed for virtual reality just raise the bar for that even further. What are you seeing on content creation to turn all this hardware we've seen into useful tools while not dramatically increasing the cost and complexity and risk around that?
Well, one cool thing about virtual reality is that it's sort of a natural extension of the gaming industry. So a lot of the platforms and tools and engines that are being used to create virtual reality actually came out of that industry. I can speak loudly. There's a lot of people who are familiar with 3D modeling and through CGI creation that are now taking a very easy and logical leap into virtual reality using things like Unity. You can do really quick prototyping, for example. I don't know if you...
Yeah. So it certainly is. It's complex in the way that making video games is complex. So there's a lot of complexities there that you don't have in simple CRUD app development. But what you also have is this incredibly robust ecosystem of Unity looks like they're running away with it. And Unity has all of these assets and script and effects that you can chain together. So if you wanted to go and create a virtual reality experience, anyone with no technical expertise but the willingness to learn can make a pretty cool VR demo in a week. For enterprise, it's going to be more difficult, and that's where the startups are going to have to come in. So, for example, my company at Agora VR, we make sales and marketing presentations for enterprise. So right now, what we would do is we would work with you and write out spec document and then build it out for you. But ultimately, it's going to be a platform. Think of it more like PowerPoint, where you can go, you can drag and drop, you can choose different assets. And to get the incredibly intensive simulations where you can really do things like training and R&D, that is going to be an expense for the larger enterprises. But for mid-levels and smaller businesses, there are going to be tools out there that let them get up and running for not...
Are there quick experiments that you can do? Like, are there quick ways to test some use cases within... I'll use, for example, the example you gave me a month ago was I have a customer who's a heavy earth-moving equipment. They sell $300 million a year of Caterpillar equipment. And these are huge, big, I mean, the wheels are bigger than the ceilings. So could you create an immersive a test of, not all the equipment, but could you go to a backhoe and like do some sort of a capturing of the data so that then you could sort of like do a quick experiment for them for a quick win?
Yeah, and there's all kinds of stuff you can do like that. If the 3D model exists, it can be put into an existing VR simulation in 10 minutes or less. And if it doesn't, it costs a couple $100s to have someone model it, or 3D scanners are getting better and better, and pretty soon you're just going to be able to, or I mean, you can already buy them. You just attach a dongle to your phone, and then you go and you walk around the thing, and 15 seconds later you have a 3D model. That's pretty good.
And that's sorry. Nope. I was going to say the value of a lot of this excitement that's bringing is that a lot of people want to do it. And so there are a lot of companies that are advancing photogrammetry, for example, so that anybody, you know, even like the Ricoh Theta
The 360, you can hold it up, you take a picture, and now you can put it on your phone. So that's very low cost. It all kind of depends on your application. If you want more interaction, that's going to be more involved. But I see that the content creation is a major focus in a lot of the big companies that have a stake in the hardware. Because if you don't have content, nobody's going to care that you have even a $20 gear device, right? Nobody's going to use it. So what I see in the industry is that a lot of the hardware folks are pushing towards better content so that everybody can get their experiences out.
A quick question to you. Why were you guys creating a virtual island instead of filming 360, a real island?
So because if you're doing, so 360 cinema is not VR. You cannot walk around in it. You really need photogrammetry. And we wanted them to be able to collect, so I only showed you a little bit. And I know the graphics are not great. The interesting thing is that even though the graphics are not great, they still measurably improved. But what we wanted in that particular application was for them to be able to collaborate on objects. So for example, we gave them each their own private islands. And some of them took this to heart. Like they built yachts and mansions and like great places to visit. And so they were able to collaborate to build with their friends and family, which is something that you can't do in 360 VR.
Is there a future virtual augmented reality coming?
Yes.
Absolutely. More so.
I think augmented reality is, I mean, we've already seen with Pokemon Go and before that with Ingress, I think is the name. Yeah, you know, they're going to be more and more exciting kind of applications, but I think it's going to be in marketing.
Thank you to all three of you. The question is this. It comes really with Jason's inspiration. I really like the three paths and the choices and an ethical approach to this entire powerful new development. Much of what you two have discussed, of course, is on the higher end on utilization in climate and space travel, for example. So a lot of this virtual reality technology pouring in now is only on high-end applications, first point. But second is you are all saying the cost of a virtual reality set's precipitously falling, like most of this technology. So on the one hand, Tilt Brush, your friend was a skeptic about your views. And then it was Kate who said, I've seen the face of the devil. My question is this. We're in an experimental phase. And the health physics aside, the impacts of these technologies, cell phones, let alone virtual reality sets, I think it would be the face of the devil if we saw ubiquity in the choice, purchase, and the application of virtual reality to small children. And I'm wondering who's watching the developmental impacts of this technology. And when is there really a threshold? You know, some say the internet is not for children, it's for adults. Let's hold that point. Is virtual reality for adults is my question. And who's watching the health physics and the psychological impacts on small children as they're going through very important phases of development?
So there's a difference between science and technology, right? And I'm more interested in the science and understanding the underlying mechanisms why this works, and therefore understanding better how we can avoid it turning into the face of the devil. So I would love to work with NIH or other organizations that's seriously, you know, doing studies on how this impacts, you know, child development and I think that's something, you know, there's been so much excitement about technology, but not necessarily the science underneath it. And I'd love to see more push towards the science.
For example, when you start up the gear, there's a warning saying that no one under 13 should actually use the device.
And parents won't, and they'll just plug it on the 2-year-old.
But see, that's exactly what it comes down to is personal responsibility. Is, you know, are we going to limit what our children use this for? There's a big difference between looking at a model of ancient Rome for a minute versus, you know, watching and consuming content for hours on end. You know, Jason alluded to some of the things that are going on. I mean, right now, the oldest profession in the world is actually being disrupted by this technology because of the content that's now out there. Gambling, you know, all of these vices that already exist are being amplified in this technology, and it's up to us to be responsible and to limit that exposure to children and make sure that it's only being used for small amounts of time and for content that's appropriate.
I'm gonna I'm going to play more of a devil's advocate on this one. I think VR is going to be great for kids if used properly. So there's Tilt Brush, and then there's also Oculus Medium, which is something that I'm really excited about. So Oculus Medium is a really incredible, fully featured 3D modeling program that you do in VR. It's like sculpting. It feels like nothing so much as sculpting, and people are using it already to create really robust, cool artistic creations and things that are going to have real economic value. And so that's the kind of thing that if a kid wants to go in and spend an hour practicing that every day like they practice an instrument, health issues of like headsets on the eyes, which I don't know the answer to yet, that's great. That is something where if they have a true love for it and they're learning and they're creating things, then I don't think that we can say just because they're in virtual reality it's necessarily bad. We have to look at the application. And I'll say from personal experience, we have gone and demoed virtual reality to some people who may or may not have been under the Oculus advised age. They love it.
Of course they do.
And, but just because they love it doesn't mean it's bad, and it doesn't mean it's good. It means it's powerful. I'll give you an example. Where's Ken? So Ken works in some of the lowest income neighborhoods in DC, trying to provide STEM education and pathways towards STEM career for the children there. And we've gone in with Ken a couple times to show off the virtual reality technology, and while the kids are a handful before we're doing it, and they're a handful after it, while we're doing it, it's incredible the enthusiasm that we see, and it's not a panacea, and we're not saying it is, but it can be a powerful component of an educational platform and way forward.
To build on that, Miramar, I was out at the Global Summit for the Global Summit, and they had the awards ceremony for the folks who were coming through the 10-week program, and then they had the winners of these companies that were essentially there for 10 weeks working on their programs, and they did a vendor show-off, and one of them, a couple of them were VR firms. One of them was a woman from Myanmar, which is that dictatorship.
Burma.
Yeah. So all I can
Burma.
think of is communism. Yeah, it's a dictatorship. It's a bad deal, and they're starting to switch. But the problem is that she can't scale the education because the adults there are on their old track. They're used to students sit there like this, and they spout information, and the kids are supposed to. Now they've tried to ship in teachers from around the world, but it's very costly to send in 20 teachers. They can't scale the teachers. So what she did, she's Harvard trained, and she went and basically created these VR headsets with immersive learning environments. She brings the VR back, and now she can take any curriculum and scale it across all the teachers, all the students, because she wants to start at the ground floor. So that's what I love, is that application of being able to scale learning. And of course, children are going to be impacted there, so that's a very discrete use
There's
case.
a program, Cedars-Sinai is doing extensive studies on this right now, and they're also studying on the effect of pain management. So they're actually giving children virtual reality applications in gaming, and it's actually helping their pain medication. So they're on top of it. Stanford is studying it, and MIT's involved too. So there are a lot of really.
Neurofeedback.
And NIH is also doing a study about pain management.
Cedars-Sinai down in Los Angeles.
Cedars-Sinai, there's a bunch of, I'm on the chair of an academic conference where we're looking at VR for health applications. USC has done a lot with PTSD. Hoffman's lab in Washington State has originated that pain med work where they're finding that it works as well as narcotics. There are a lot of efforts, especially for anxiety disorders as well. But this is, this is very little compared to the amount of technology investment. And so that's where I think a lot of future work can go, looking at real, meaningful, impactful outcomes.
I wonder if it would have impact, just following in this vein of thought, in help with addiction,
Yep.
substance abuse addiction, and actually using it to trigger the same hormones and in the human body and then
Yeah.
flowing it, right?
Stanford actually did this really interesting experiment, the Stanford VR lab, where it wasn't exactly addiction, but it was kind of food addiction. So what
Right.
they did was they put people into a VR simulation. They had them eat. I think the experiment was they had them eat an unhealthy meal and then put on a headset and watch their avatar like kind of blow it up. And it worked. It worked better than a lot of other therapies. I'm sure Peggy knows way more about this stuff than me, but it was super cool reading about that, and I think there is a ton of application there.
So you're really talking about a behavior change, right? And so it has to be, so we're building some experiences looking at psychologically grounded evidence-based theories of behavior change and applying it in the stimulus. So I think we could try a lot of things. There's a lot of prior work that we could build on as opposed to do it from scratch.
Go ahead, Roberto.
3 short comments and questions. The first, there was a nice piece from Peter Diamandis on VR and sex in his Medium
Yeah, I
channel.
saw that. Yeah.
The second, I really like your point on empathy. I think that really empathy is something that is in short supply around the world, and that today the cost to build empathy is really high, and that could be lowered with VR, and that comes to media. I think that media is something that will be disrupted. My question is, do you know anything happening in the media space in the DC area related to VR? And third question, short thing, did you control the time that each one of the astronauts would be using VR in an experiment? I believe that different people react differently, also in terms of engaging and feeling attracted by that.
So our experiment design was once a week, 30 minutes, and they could do more if they wanted.
Okay.
We measured before and after.
In terms of empathy, quasi-over seizure, what Jason mentioned and I alluded to in my presentation, the UN sponsored that, and they wanted to fundraise $2 billion for the Syrian refugees. They actually raised $3 billion, a full third more than what they had projected, because this was such a powerful way to bring that story to people. So it's definitely has a lot of potential for creating empathy, but then also taking action and allowing people to take that next step.
And DC, anything
what's
happening in the
happening in DC?
media
Come to the DC VR meetup and you'll find out the opportunities.
Okay.
There is a lot of media though.
Yeah, so Discovery VR is the big one. Discovery is investing a lot of resources into this. Really, the people that are doing best right now, they're starting up their own independent
Channels.
Yeah, basically they buy the 360 video, they start making this stuff, they start coming to the DC VR meetups and finding people there that need 360 video stuff.
And even the big organizations like the Washington Post and the New York Times, the World Bank, they're actually partnering with smaller firms who are doing the actual 360 video production for the most.
Go ahead.
I know this is a philosophical question, but
Can you speak up again?
I said I know this is a philosophical question, but if you call it what it is it detaching from this universe?
Well, we all live in our own individual realities, don't we? I mean, it goes back to the question of how can we be sure any of this is real?
It's not a no.
It's not. No, it's not a no. But also in social VR, I would argue that if the social VR is good enough, you're just as there as we are together right now. And I'm detaching when I read a book every night, but sometimes detaching is good. So
My interest is, we talked a bit about presence. My interest is in co-presence. If you email your mom or if you call her on the phone, she looks nothing like your phone or email, but you know that you're talking to her. So it's really, your experience of another person is what I'm most interested in. I mean, if you're traveling, it's not your usual reality, but that's your, holiday reality. What's that?
There was
circuits.
Well, and it seems counterintuitive that virtual reality would allow people to connect and not be isolated, but there's an experience platform called AltSpace VR where people are doing just that, and so using the Vive and other headsets, they're actually logging in and are able to interact with people And it is surprising how you do feel a sense of presence even though you're not looking at the actual person, and you can shoot basketball hoops and, you know, watch a movie together and do things. So it actually has the potential to bring people closer together if they choose to use it that way.
The debate and also
There was
Yeah.
in 1980 there was a novel, Star Trek novel, that was published, and there was a line in it that I was reminded of when you said this. The computer in this vein said to Captain Kirk, "Don't be protein chauvinist. Just because you're getting your electrical impulses through another way into your brain and not directly through."
That's a great
your-
line.
Go ahead.
You mentioned this concept of co-presence. Are you aware of any elder care plays? Because I think this would be huge, you know, loneliness being a really significant
That's
health threat for
exactly
humanity.
one of the areas we would love to address.
Are you aware of
And
any,
we're,
you know, anyone doing interesting work in this space and companies?
yes, and yeah, we could talk afterwards, but there are few, yeah.
You ever heard of a novel for the movie Kogod?
I've spoiler alert, it's people.
To your question, SK Telecom is doing some things, but Asia is a little bit ahead when it comes to
Yeah, the Japanese are very comfortable with robots and,
They
yeah.
don't have any
I do want
caregivers.
to.
Yes, yeah, out of need, yeah.
Go
I
ahead.
do want to say one quick thing to address that concern. I've actually heard that concern quite a bit, or what you brought up with kids. And I always sort of respond with the same question. Rather than reinvent the wheel, we realize that for gaming, which is more attractive to kids, this is content that has already been regulated by ESRB. ESRB is there to provide parents with tools, to provide whatever guidelines they need, and taking the responsibility to entertain or educate, you know, children, or, you know. So again, to your point, it is a responsibility, but there are regulatory guidelines to help control what type of content gets into the hands of the types of people, and those are very, very
And,
valid.
and it's going to go faster than our ability to regulate, which is this is going to track no differently than these others. So the people in this room, it's incumbent from a leader to understand these impact points, because dopamine, I mean, the Rise of Superman, the Stephen Kotler book, right, The Rise of Superman, is all about flow triggers. There's 16 flow triggers which move us into extraordinary performance states. And it doesn't have to be jumping off cliffs or things of that nature. You might just have 2 or 3. Public speaking, for some people, won't push them into a flow state because it's too fearful. But when you're on the edge, that's what moves you into that flow state. Well, VR is going to do that for children, and because it's going to trigger dopamine and it's going to flood their brain really, really fast. So we just
Which
gotta,
is addiction.
Right,
Which is
right.
food.
But I mean, induced flow state is very interesting, like actively self-induced or
Yeah.
flow state, rather than what you jump into just because you're in which is more passive, right? You're put in a position where flow state occurs rather than
So I had a question.
inducing it off of.
That environment looks a bit like Second Life,
Yeah.
which was a sort of virtual reality.
Yeah, open simulator, yeah.
How do you get over the asynchronous aspect?
Just custom code programming
So,
software.
so they're not really communicating with their family in real time.
No, they're not communicating in real time at all. It seems like it. There's a sense of, it's kind of like when you listen to voicemail and you know that's your wife or spouse, and even though it's not in real time, you know that is a genuine message from your spouse.
Yeah, the difference is you don't see an avatar moving around.
Right.
So that's the thing that intrigues me.
Yeah, you don't see right, so when it's voicemail, you don't see the avatar. For us, you see the avatar, you see their actions, you see their manipulations of objects, and you could go and manipulate the objects with them.
and the impact of avatars. Everybody read the book Super Better?
Yeah, great book.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a really great. She's one of the few researchers that's researching the positive effects of gaming, and of choosing and selecting avatars, and what that means psychologically, and how you can choose avatars that are really advantageous to you. So there's a really impact on a lot of research that she's doing and others. And it's called Super Better. She also has a great TED Talk as well on the impact of gaming from the positive angle, because they looked at once you hit the 30 hours they found everything up to 30 hours is completely positive. They haven't found any psychological issues. Once you hit 30 plus, you're in addiction world. So it's interesting some of the depth that's going on with that.
I want to mention, back to his first question about sort of the barrier to entry in terms of cost. And Peggy mentioned that 360 video isn't really VR, and that's true, but it's a way to stick your toe in the water, and it's relatively inexpensive. It costs, more than regular video production, but not significantly more. And you can overlay text and infographics and all kinds of things. So you could create like a virtual tour of a facility. It's being used a lot for real estate and by architecture firms and things like that. So you can think of 360 video as sort of VR light, and of course you can still view it in a headset.
So you're only defining VR as being an environment in which you can actually interact with components in that environment. I think a lot of us journalists would sort of question the fact that 360 video is VR light.
A lot of people are calling it spherical video.
It's not that it's not powerful.
It's a continuum.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
It's at one end and fully immersive with controllers is at the other. HTC Vive's at the other.
And for a lot of people who haven't experienced VR, I find that sometimes a 360 video impacts them more than something that was very complex and difficult to program, just because it quote unquote looks real to them. And so when they look around and see a video of this room and they feel like they're in the middle of the room, even though that's not a technically challenging thing to do anymore, that actually is more impactful.
Photorealism is it kind of appeals to your innate sensibilities, right? I think it all depends on what your purpose is. So you have to. So that's why I think Second Life failed. Or it stopped growing at the rate that it did before, because there are some people who can inherently find a purpose and do that within the virtual world, and some people who can't. So being able to have a meaningful experience, some people were able to do that within their Second Life. Whatever solution you're creating, it has to have some purpose to it, and that's going to help you kind of define what technologies you're going to use. I agree, it shouldn't be the most complicated one.
And there's also a couple really interesting technologies on the horizon, notably light fields and also LiDAR mapping, which will allow you to take a real-time capture like you do with a 360 video, except instead of being locked in the sphere, you'll be able to lock the whole simulation, which gets rid of, I think, a lot of the hang-ups that some people have with 3D video today.
So Cheyenne kind of went a little bit there, so now it's finally here to stay. So do you see a market for small startups in there? So I kind of work in both of the areas of virtual reality, augmented reality, and Internet of Things. And I think the entrance barrier, like Camille said, in Internet of Things is so much lower than in virtual reality that I don't know if you will ever get small developers and small startups and really creative ideas into virtual reality. I think it's inhibitively expensive to enter this market.
I think I'm the poster child, though, for saying that that's not true, because we're a tiny company and we signed up to get developer kits and we started playing
So where
around
are the
with
markets you can enter?
So, go ahead. I think it just, we were already doing some work with NASA, and so we were able to show people things, these ideas that we had about science visualization, and create a project and create a market for ourselves by thinking outside the box a little bit and looking at an application of, what is a way that this technology could be used that somebody isn't really using it. So if you have an expertise in a niche area, you could potentially look at ways to start developing things for that specific market. There are huge companies out there that are very well funded, and there are also lots of tiny companies who are all trying to push the ball forward with it.
I think the key differentiator, though, is VR. You have to create that market if you want to actually turn into a business. Yeah. IoT, you're basically improving existing markets, so the barrier to entry, not just on development and everything else, but on the marketing standpoint, is vastly different. I mean,
I had a question about AR versus VR as another sort of middle ground position. Just speaking from personal experience, I am much more comfortable with AR like with a HoloLens device, simply because I'm still in my environment and it's superimposed. The immersive thing is hard. And so do you think perhaps the adoption of AR, across a spectrum of use cases will come perhaps more quickly and easily than the total immersive VR?
The motion parallax problem is difficult to solve with the hardware. So I agree that a lot of people are more comfortable with AR. I think those are two completely different uses and they will grow in parallel.
For example, with AR, I've seen use cases just recently where, somebody in a small business and they have a big equipment breakdown, like a freezer in a restaurant. With an AR situation, they can do some useful things with that, but they're still in their environment, they're interacting with the sensors that may or may not be able to build. It just seems to me on an implementation level that at an adoption curve, we may see AR before.
So again, it really, I think, depends on the purpose and the meaning that you're bringing into your application. Like for us, we're going to, for this new grant, we're working with aphasia clients. So aphasia is often associated with brain damage. So the communication part of your brain is not working, which means cognitively you're completely intact, but you can't find the words to say what you want to say. So we're going to be looking at mixed reality AR as a way to deliver therapy because they need that real environment to kind of ground them.
Yeah. Interesting. And what you're saying, I think AR and VR are definitely cousins, and potentially AR is going to have a much bigger impact on professional environments because you can really think in any sector, whether it's manufacturing or whether it's the FedEx guy, who can see information projected onto a package, that in a professional environment, AR is going to be incredibly useful.
The fact of the matter, though, is, so we talk about VR, AR, but really, once you get that system that is the full package for AR, it's going to be able to do VR too. It's going to look like my glasses. It's probably going to be from Magic Leap, I think. And what's going to happen is you might start off your day and you'll just have a simple heads-up display, and then you do your job and you have the information overlay there. On the way home, you switch to like Mars mode, and so you're still in the real world, but you see the Earth off in the distance, and then you go home and switch into fully immersive VR. So it's not going to be total baseline reality or total VR with AR occupying all between. It's just how much do I want right now? What makes my life the best right now?
The original.
Do you foresee in a dozen years or so the development of some kind of a few common shared platforms for VR interaction? In other words, the Facebooks and the Twitters, the major social media. How would that happen? And I mean, I'm asking you to put your
There's a
crystal
reason
ball
Facebook bought
sure.
right? I mean, they
So it might be
really,
Facebook again.
I think they're really anticipating that the future of social media is going to make that transition to VR/AR. So I think all of us really believe that there's a huge future and it will become part of our lives.
I'm not going to make any predictions because I don't want to end up on the board 10 years.
Ready Player One, if you haven't read that.
Well, yeah,
That's a vision into
and Snow Crash. So, and the thing is, all the people that are working on this all have said, oh yeah, we're trying to build the Oasis from Ready Player One. So if that's not it's ultimately gonna end up being, that's the model that they're working for.
But isn't that one of the biggest risks, though, that you basically have these huge power players that are just going to further consolidate their power? And you talk about democratization. I think dematerialization, demonetization is going to happen. But the democratization is a real challenge because of the entry costs and because you have these power players that have access to data and resources that dwarf everyone else. I mean, for small companies like you have a huge challenge to really enter the marketplace and move the needle on that. Because if Google, Facebook, or the Ubers of the world decide to step on your turf.
I don't understand though, because we're talking about content, right? Content's going to drive this. So
we're
they're
not building
driving
any
content.
hardware, and we have no plans to build any hardware.
Fine, but it's still the walled gardens.
But they're plumbing. I mean, one's plumbing and one's what you push through the plumbing. So
Also, look at the internet and how that really created a democracy for so many different professions. I was just listening on the radio on the way here talking about how the media industry has been completely upended by people being able to have blogs and to be able to create media content from scratch on their own.
But
And-
that's potentially shifting, though. I mean, the whole point is we're potentially losing that to these power players.
You make a great point, and I mean we are seeing the consolidation of the internet among these big power players. And could it get worse in VR? Absolutely, 100%. There's some interesting work that's being done with the Open VR initiative, and actually right here in DC, we have a developer, one of our organizers at DC VR, who's making an open source JavaScript framework called Primrose.js to create essentially an open source set of protocols and platforms for VR. But at the end of the day, do I think something open like that's going to win out? No, I think you're right. I think it's going to be a big problem.
This is economically driven, like Bill is saying. We're at the deceptive phase now, and it's a costly entry point. But when it does skyrocket,
Cost will drop.
it will open up. I think it will.
I think you'll probably see some new players, but I think the risk is you're going to, again, consolidate down to 1 to 3 major players that are going to dictate the terms. That's a real risk.
I just want to say one thing I heard recently that I think sheds a little light on this is that Facebook only focuses on things that will impact 100 million or more people. And so the opportunity, and there's tons of it, if you have a user group that's less than 100 million, which is what my company's focused on, then
Yeah, and that's a great point.
They're not going into that. It's not worth it for them because their marketplace is billions. Like, you're talking about solving for billions.
I mean,
You
if-
solve for 50 million and have a huge market. That's a market. Yeah.
I mean, Amy, one of the big pieces is not what's the is right. The right quality question is how can I participate,
Right.
and how can I participate now? And if you're an enterprise person, how can I test and make this usable and practical? How can I do this before I'm disrupted potentially? Like, how can I add this as an innovation piece to my business to help people? Because I think that the impact from the experience is such that whether we're on the building side, or whether we're on the enterprise side, or the government, I think there's a way to use it. I just think it's a matter. It's a bit of, we got to think about it from an entrepreneur's mind cap, though. I think not always. We got to think about it from a creative point of view of how we want to bring value to people through it.
For example, just really quickly, so for Bill's industry, cybersecurity, you'd say, okay, well, how can this even be useful? Well, actually, this meets all kinds of compliance standards for the government in terms of screen protection and looking at classified and sensitive data. So you can actually, start taking it a step further and thinking, all right, I could have a virtual SOC, or I could train people in a SOC environment without actually giving them access to my secure facility. So I think that there definitely are ways to apply the technology.
I love the big data application you talked about, because how many of us have too much data? I think it's personally we have too much on the enterprise and the government. So what if you could come into and visualize that data, and that would not only that helpful in a two-dimensional way, but what if we can then put it into this VR space? That's completely powerful. I got that. I'm sorry. What you second first? Go ahead. No, you had your hand up.
I was just going to say, Jason and I read a thing the other night where there were some, DoD type folks there, and what they're looking for in developing these kind of applications. And one fellow I thought was interesting. He was saying, I am really no longer interested in the face-centric kind of visor. We're looking for like whole room environment, and that we find another presenter who was in NIH said, the things with like helping people learn to adapt to new limbs and use them and stuff, they said again, the full face thing is obstructive. That it needs to be like a room and an environment, a whole body environment. So you remember that, Jason?
Yeah.
I'm probably mangling this.
No,
But
they said that.
I think that's an interesting aspect too, because I just really think the face visor thing is an obstacle to be overcome.
So the DoD's been using virtual reality for a long time, except they call it simulations, right? I mean, we've been doing that for a long time. The excitement now with the face-centric VR is because it's very cost-effective. You have a piece of cardboard and you could cut it into the right shape. So I think that's what, you look at it goes to the purpose. So if you need, we're starting to get bodysuits now, low-cost mocap. if that's kind of the purpose, you need to train the whole body, and you know, we've got all these other different modalities, not just the visual and audio. Yeah, I mean, that's going to continue, but then that is not going to be necessarily for, you know, VR-based travel.
Yeah, it's not going to be
Yeah.
for your
And going
smartphone.
back to the cell phones, I mean, those big chunky cell phones from the late 90s, and then now how slim and sleek phones are now, that's what we're going to see with the hardware as well.
So we're at the 128K modem stage, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm
Did you
a
have-
great VR enthusiast, but I can't help remember what happened to 3D TV. When it failed, because people didn't like wearing.
3D TV failed because 3D TV sucked, though. Let's be honest. If you can watch a 3D TV and then try Tilt Brush and tell me they're in the same universe of experience, then I will concede that. But I'm sorry. We hear that comparison all the time, and it's just totally different.
No, I hope it doesn't. It just resonates.
But 3D TV doesn't really add anything. Like, first of all, when I go to a 3D movie, I can't see it because I have astigmatism. So that's already lost on me. And even if I could, like, what does it really add to have a ball come out me from the screen?
It's supposed to be a bit more like real life, which is what you're talking about.
I still think the secret sauce for VR is co-presence.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Just sort of a softball question, if you might, to James or anyone who can answer. Outside of education, entertainment, and those are the two major sort of tempos you can add. Gaming, all that stuff, movies, cinematic experiences, entertainment. You can add training for corporations and all that stuff, and pre-K and all that, sort of letting people experience things empathically, whatever, to the educational section. Outside of those two paradigms, where have you seen just new ideas crop out of that don't fit into those two categories?
Health.
Well, I kind of unfairly put that into education as well.
Okay.
Well,
You're actually changing like the status and behavior of people, so.
Well, that's actually true, but what I was thinking about health was more training.
Well, the NIH speaker from the other night said, you know, I see a day where all physical therapy is virtual.
I have a personal anecdote there. So I had actually a long time ago, I had messed up my shoulder, my rotator cuff. I couldn't move it out more than this, and it was terrible. I couldn't exercise, it was no fun. So I got the Vive, and I was like, oh man, this makes me go and do all of the movements that I don't like doing because my shoulder hurts, and that's going to suck because I love VR and I want to get better. So what I did was I spent a lot of time in Tilt Brush, a lot of time in a lot of other VR experiences, and it's essentially fixed now.
You're
virtually
better.
So imagine a Tilt Brush like template with a physical therapist who has outlined how you should do your therapy based on your. So there's an idea.
And then it's gamified too.
Yeah.
And then you add in you make it like a rhythm game too. That's the thing. So you can
cool.
stack all these things on top of each other. So it's it's fun. It's a game. You get in flow, and it makes you exercise. You can make it social. There's all these. Shayna is saying we have no idea what the hell we're going to be doing in VR in 10 years. Just like we didn't know we were going to use Uber on our smartphones. But
This was a softball because I just want to tee up a gentleman I just met here who's actually thinking about psychology with VR, which is actually just, there's so much, I'm a developer in this space, and there's so much unique stuff that unlocks the types of things. And I tend to sort of lob up this question that I'm basically here as a plant. I love this question so that you can actually sort of realize that, I don't know whether you guys have seen sort of movies that sort of talk about alternate universes, where there's an upside down. Imagine being able to sort of reimagine and not have to shovel with what works on a tablet or on a computer paradigm. There is no screen, right? There is no rectangle. I'm in the AR space, which, to answer someone else's initial question, I've written about this in the media. I've actually talked about this at conferences. I think it's really interesting to sort of compare the two, AR and VR. What really matters is what the content, what you're trying to achieve. Because as a matter of fact, I think VR, I think AR is sort of where the ultimate goal is, in my personal opinion, and that VR is sort of a gateway drug to sort of seeing what is possible when you leave that computer screen or that black rectangle aside.
So Tony, do you mind if I ask you a question? Sure. So Tony is in charge of innovation in American Psychological Association, amongst being the CIO there as well. I'd love for you to, what do you see from VR and potential applications with, as you?
I mean, there's lots of interest within the psychologist domain in that space. And it ranges on the health and behavior change. There's a lot of experimentation going on nationwide. One simple aspect is the treatment of phobias. This has been tested for many years, but clearly there's lots of exploration of that. There's, I think, 700,000 people in the U.S. cannot get children data, for example. And therapy believes this can be fixed, and virtual reality can help a lot. But I think the interesting part is that the emerging new models for communication, and that VR will present us over the coming few years. And from the psychology perspective, there's an interest in testing the implication, what it means, what's the emerging models in that sense. So we have a media psychology division, for example, with a lot of work in that space. We'll be hosting an event in early 18 around some of the implication of this from a psychology perspective. So some of the people here will be interested in that.
Where are you, Tom?
The American Psychology Association.
I know someone with seasonal affective disorder who's self-medicating with just using different VR experiences and sitting on a sunny beach, and he's feeling like it's making a positive impact.
You know, if I might, neurofeedback is an old protocol that came out of California.
Yeah.
It was really, it's been effective, but it takes a long time to remap the brain.
Yeah.
And when healthcare insurance cratered, there was no longer a clientele. Actually, it was the financial crisis of 2008. A lot of people were bringing, particularly children, for brain mapping through neurofeedback. And they couldn't afford it anymore because insurance doesn't cover it. So now I'm hearing that virtual reality can help leapfrog into the neurofeedback
Where
spaces and really help, because they were helping with migraine headaches, they were helping with ADD, they were getting kids off drugs.
Yeah.
But it took, and blood pressure, but it really took a long time. It took 24 to 36 installments to really make an impact, because it was a slow process of remapping. Maybe this will accelerate it.
Maybe we'll find out. We're working with a company in Israel who does neuroimaging for that aphasia project, so I'd love to talk to you more about it.
There's actually been a lot of work done for post-traumatic stress disorder using VR to treat that, and they've had great successes with that, and very rapid too.
And if anybody wants, I'd be happy to connect them with a lot of the researchers in that field.
Everyone, it's 2 o'clock. I want to let's give a big applause for our speakers. Thank you very much for spending time with us today. It's fantastic. So if anybody, I just want to respect the fact that it's 2 o'clock and we're supposed to end now, but if anybody has any questions and stuff, we'll be all milling about for a period of time. But those of you that need to get out of here too, feel free. Oh, that's good.
Also, anyone wants to learn more, DCVR, just Google DCVR, or the first or second. We have meetups all the time. Talk to us.
Jason, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was fantastic.
I'm always.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. Yeah. Totally. Thank you. Oh, I see you back. Yeah.
I'd be interested in learning